my wedding, my fiancé's family pointed at my mother and laughed. "Look at that miserable poor woman," her father sneered. Then my bride grabbed a garden hose and said, "Maybe I should wash the poverty off her." I stepped in front of her, removed my ring and said, "The wedding is over, and by sunrise your family will no longer have an empire." The first blast of cold water hit my mother's face before I even understood why the guests were laughing. Her gray dress soaked through in seconds. Her white hair stuck to her cheeks. And Alyssa, my bride, minutes from becoming my wife, stood there holding the garden hose steady, grinning like she'd just told the funniest joke of the night. "Would you look at that?" Charles Whitmore called from the terrace, lifting his champagne glass. "She looks like she wandered here from a bus station." The guests laughed with him. I ran to my mother. She was shaking. Her hands trembled as she tried to wipe her face. "Danny, please," she whispered. "Not today. Don't ruin your wedding." That broke something in me. She was the one soaked and humiliated, and she was still worried about my day. Alyssa aimed the hose again. "Relax. I'm just rinsing the poverty off her." I stepped in front of my mother. The water hit my chest instead. "Put it down," I said. "Don't be dramatic. Everyone knows it's a joke." 200 guests watched under white canopies. A drone camera hovered above, filming everything. The string quartet had stopped playing. I pulled off my ring. Alyssa's smile disappeared. "What are you doing?" "The wedding's over," I said. "And by sunrise, your family won't own a single thing." Charles laughed so hard he nearly spilled his drink. "Our empire? You're a consultant who drives a 6-year-old car." He had no idea. For 2 years, I let the Whitmores believe I was some ordinary guy lucky to marry into money. I sat through Charles's dinners. I reviewed his contracts. I listened to him brag about hotels and acquisitions. He never once asked why 3 banks approved emergency credit for his failing company in 48 hours. He never asked who really controlled Northbridge Capital, the investment firm quietly propping up his entire business behind a wall of holding companies. And he never asked why my mother, worth more than his entire estate, wore a plain gray dress to her son's wedding. I wrapped my jacket around her shoulders and walked her to the car. Charles followed us across the lawn. "Walk away now, and you lose everything. The apartment, your job. I made your career." I stopped and turned around. That was what he actually believed. My mother built Northbridge from a 2-room office after my father died. She avoided cameras, avoided headlines, kept her name off every document she could. When she handed the company to me, almost nobody knew. Charles only knew Northbridge as the firm that saved his hotels after 3 failed projects. He didn't know I'd spent 8 months quietly documenting exactly what he'd done with our money. Every dinner where he bragged about a new acquisition, I remembered the numbers. Every contract he handed me to review, I made a copy first and kept it somewhere he'd never think to look. Months earlier, he'd asked me to help clean up some paperwork before the wedding. He wanted the old versions gone, quietly shredded, no questions asked. I kept every single one instead. Redirected renovation funds into shell companies tied to his brother. Faked occupancy numbers. A pressured appraiser. Employee pension money used as collateral without authorization. Money that belonged to hundreds of hotel workers who trusted him. And Alyssa's name was on nearly $1 million in consulting fees for work she never did. I got my mother into the car and called my attorney. "Rebecca," I said, watching Alyssa rip off her veil through the windshield. "Release the files." By the time we reached the office, wedding footage was already spreading online. Alyssa spraying an old woman, Charles laughing, 200 guests cheering along. 2 directors had resigned. A bank was demanding immediate access to the books. Charles still didn't understand what was happening. He sent me a photo from the boardroom. Him and Alyssa, still in her gown, smiling like they'd already won. "You chose the wrong family to threaten." At midnight, Rebecca and I walked into that same boardroom. My mother walked between us, still in her damp gray dress, coat over her arm. Charles saw her, and the color drained from his face. Alyssa froze, mid-sentence. "What is she doing here?" Rebecca set a folder on the table without answering. She opened it slowly, in no hurry at all, while every director in the room leaned forward to see what was inside. Full story on channel. Link below.